So, my name is Mais Alheraki. I'm a Flutter GDE. I live in Saudi Arabia.
Um,
And
sorry
mhm.
to interrupt. Are you sharing, Mayas?
No, I'll start sharing now. You were
Okay.
sharing. All right, so let's go to. We don't have slides today because it's going to be a workshop, completely hands-on. So maybe if you want to follow up with me, you can. If you have Flutter already installed, you can bring up your IDE and we will go together in every step. So, but just like a little introduction about me. I work on the Flutter Fire with the Invertase team maintenance, and currently I'm leading the project of supporting Flutter Fire on Linux and Windows. You might want to check that out. Currently, we have Firebase Authentication working on Linux and Windows in preview. If like we would like the community support on that, so if you want to try it out, play around with it, and or if you would like to contribute. Okay, so yeah, so I work mainly on Firebase most of my time. And I really like Firebase. I feel like Firebase is like Flutter for the front end. So with Flutter, we can build for and target many platforms. With Firebase as well, we can target many platforms and build amazing apps in record time. We don't have to bother with all the back end and servers and stuff like the headache of setting up everything, make sure everything is secure. It's all handled for us. We just plug it in our apps and start using its amazing capabilities. So Firebase is like a backend for your apps. You can, there are a couple of products in Firebase, including they are like on three categories. The first one we use like authentication base and storage, these things. And then after you finish building, you want to release and monitor your applications. You want to see the analytics. You want to have some kind of useful feedback on your users, crashes, such stuff. This is all can be done with Firebase. And then measure the engage of your users, uh, give them like show them some in-app messages and change stuff in your app from your back end. That's all can be done with remote config and cloud messaging and all this stuff. And it's all inside one project. Like you can get all these things, all these features inside one Firebase project that you can connect with or any other app really. You can use Firebase with web, you can use Firebase with a native iOS, native Android, um, C++ as well. They have C++ SDK. Yeah, so it's portable, it's easy, it has a lot of features. Now today on two projects from the build category, which are Cloud Firestore, authentication. Authenticate users using Firebase, and we're gonna store data using the whole of this shop is already available on as a code lab for Firebase. For example, didn't like how I explained stuff, or you got stuck at some point, you didn't understand how to. Of course, you're welcome to post a question, but it's already there, all the instructions. There's a nice 57 minute video, a whole code lab by one of the Firebase team code lab. So I hope, Diba, if you can post code lab link to the chat so we can start following up together. Before we begin, this workshop or this code lab is going mainly focusing on Firebase in Flutter. It's not focusing on Flutter itself, so I'm going to skip over the Flutter parts and focus on how you can use Firebase in Flutter. Assuming you have got the basic understanding how Flutter works, how you can change the state, and all these things. Okay, so what we were going to create is this app. It's a simple app where you can RSVP to an event, and after have a discussion with everyone who the RSVPs to the same event. And also log out, like cancel your RSVP. On
Maya, sorry to interrupt. Can you post that link in there, the Firebase
yes.
chat, please?
Hello?
Hello? I think we lost you. Hello?
I hear hello.
Yes, go ahead, Maya. Yeah, continue.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like, suddenly, my device decided to cut off all the blue. Okay. So you have all the link now. My voice is clear? The screen is clear?
Yes, yes, very clear. So I posted it.
Yeah, okay. So we will be building this Firebase Meetup application. We will not really build it from scratch, actually. We're going to clone a starter application and we're going to build over it. So what we're going to need, you're going to need a simulator, either an iOS simulator or an Android emulator. You can have both, but you can just run on one if this is going to slow down your laptop. For me, I will try to show work on all 4 platforms. You're gonna need an IDE, that's Android Studio or Visual Studio Code. You have to have Flutter installed on the stable channel and a Google account. You're gonna need the Google account to create a Firebase project. And we're gonna need the Firebase command line tool. That's this Firebase CLI. I'll also post the link. So while I'm explaining bits at the beginning, you can, if you don't have it already, you can install it quickly. How we are going to use it, we're going to see in a bit. And lastly, we need the Code Labs sample code, how we can get that. If we go to the next step, there's this repository. If we just go and navigate through the repository, organization called Code Labs, and it has all the code for the Flutter website. So if we go to Google, sorry, here. Oh no, forget it. Yeah, here, Flutter Code Labs. You can see with the Flutter tag selected, we can see all these code labs that we can learn through about different topics in Flutter. Our code lab today is this one, Get to Know Firebase for Flutter. So all the code for all these code labs can be found in this repository. We will be interested in this folder only, Firebase Get to Know Flutter. If we navigate inside, we can notice that Flutter project. Like each step is a complete Flutter project. It's made this way to be convenient for you. For example, if you were following with step 2 till step 4 and your app is not working anymore, you can check the code in step 4 and see what, and compare it with your working, with the version that is not working, and see what. Okay, for us, if we go to code, we're going to clone this repository. Okay, for example, cd desktop, and we clone the repository. Okay, I already have cloned it, so I'll just need to cd inside. And then we need to cd inside step 2. So in the code lab, we are already in step 2. So our starter code is going to be in step 2. Over that. Cool. Now we are inside the project. We have the starter code. It's time to open the IDE. I've already opened the IDE on step 2. And just make that a little bit larger. Okay. I'll open and an iOS simulator. I will run the app to get started. If we go to the run and debug, we can notice multiple configurations, one for iPhone, Android, Chrome, macOS. These configurations have a different targeting different device. Since I have an Android, I'm sorry, the iPhone and click run. This will launch my application. While it compiles, and this is where all our Dart code lives, we can find that it already has files, and if you notice, there is already some code. We will not start from scratch. We will build over the starter code. So let's just take a look at what we already have. If we go to widgets.dart, we can notice that we have multiple widgets: header, paragraph, icon and detail, and styled button. And all of them are just styled stateless widgets that have some kind of styling. Like, for example, this icon and detail is just a row that has an icon and a text with some padding. That's it. It's just there for our convenience and reusability. We'll not touch into that. We're just going to. And if we go to authentication, which is the interesting part about this app, we can notice first we have the application login state. Now, in the application login state, there are 5 states. And this describes the state of our application on each of the authentication states. The first one is logged out. User logged in, so the application is currently on a logged out state. The user chooses or clicks on login, the state address. We're going to ask them to enter the email address. And then there is 2 possible states after the user enters their email address. The first state is that there is no user registered with that email address, so we're going to ask them to enter their details and sign them up. That's the register state. The second state is the user already have an account, and we're just going to ask them to enter the password so we can log them in. And that. So after email, we have 2 possible states, and then we are logged in. If we go down to see what's inside the authentication widget, it's just a stateless widget that holds or requires multiple states. For example, it takes in which state I am currently from the application states. It's an application login state. And takes the email of the user if there is any. We notice it's a nullable string, so it can be null. And start login flow, it's just a function from which we start the login flow. The verify email is another callback, and then sign in with email about and password is a callback, cancel registration. It's just a bunch of callback that we're going to pass from the outside. So it's really, this authentication widget is really just a widget. It doesn't handle the logic inside of it. It displays to the user widgets based on which state we are in right now, and calls these callback based on what widget shows to the user and what button they are clicking. Okay, so if we go down a little bit, we will note the method, that's where the UI is going to be returned. There is a switch statement. So inside the switch case, a flow, we're going to switch over the login states. The first case we have is that there is no user. So if there is no user, please return a button that says RSVP. And when the user clicks on that button, I'm going to start the login flow. Okay, so once this login state changes, it's going to be inside, or the state is going to be the email address. Now the email address is going to show, we want to show that, like, we want the authentication widget to show the user an email form to ask them to enter their email. So we'll return an email form, and this email form takes a code that the user enters the correct email. And if they don't, like it's an invalid email, we will show them an error message. The second is, after they enter like the email, we're gonna check user registered or not, and based will either return a password form or return a registration form. Okay, and the registration form will take the email, display name, and the password. Unlike when the user already have an, it just takes a password. Now the user logged in. We are in the logged in state. What are we going to show the user? We're going to show a styled button that log out. And once the user clicks on it, it's going to sign them out. Now, in case it's something wrong happened, we're just going to return an error, internal error. This shouldn't happen. Okay, now if we go down a little bit, we notice this is our error dialog. It's just a show dialog, an alert that says what's have been going wrong, and the email form is a stateful widget, and then the registration form again is just a form, and the password form. I'm not gonna go into the details in here. It's just a bunch of Flutter widgets, but we will focus on the actual how to actually implement this logic of login and how to authenticate the user. Okay, this is already done for us. So if we go back, we see already the app is running here. Go down a little bit to the home page, we will notice that we have an app bar that says Firebase Meetup, and then in the body we have a list view, and inside that list view, it first starts with this image from the assets. We already see it here in assets, and then we have a size box that's like a little bit of space between the image and this icon and detail about the date, and another icon and detail about the location. And then we have a divider, this line here, and then we have a header. Notice this header, we take it from widgets.data. And then we have a paragraph. That's it. So we will widget in this place. But before that, let's get our code lab. And we've already reviewed everything here. If we go to the next step, is to create a Firebase project. Until now, we don't have any Firebase project. So to do that, let's navigate to the Firebase Console. And in here, I can see, welcome to the Firebase, create a project. I don't have any projects created, but if I have any project, I will see them here, like a list of all my projects, and I can create another project. If we click on create a project, we can give it a name. I'm gonna just call it Flutter and Firebase Code Lab. And we accept, and we notice that it gives it a unique identifier. Of course, there are, like all of you are now going to create Firebase projects, and it might have the same name. So if you create project with the same name, it's just gonna of randomness by adding characters as an ID. If we continue, it asks us if we want to add Google Analytics or enable Google Analytics in this Firebase project. Currently, I don't want to do that, but if you want to enable again Google Analytics for your Firebase project, you can do it from inside the project. It's fine. So just a second while it creates my project. And to create a Firebase project, you must have a Gmail account. All right, we have a project ready. It's now going to take me to the console. Okay, so in the console, we started by adding your Firebase app, iOS, Android, web, but I'm not here. I will use the Flutter Fire CLI. About it in a bit. If we go back to the Code Lab, we already have done everything. Yes. Now, if we navigate, if we go back to the CLI, we'll see here build, release, analytics, and engage. We can see all the different products of Firebase that we can use. We are interested into, in this Code Lab, we're going to use authentication and Firestore database. By default, most of these disabled. Like if you try to connect to them and use them, they are disabled. You need to go in and click Get Started. Then in the sign-in methods, it's going to ask me what kind of providers I want to add to my app. I can add any of these providers like Google, Facebook, Apple, Anonymous, but the easiest one and the one we're going to use in this Code Lab is going to be email and password. We're going to enable them and then click Save. And now we have email and password enabled. Cool. Now let's enable Firestore. If we navigate to Firestore, again, it asks me to create a database. Now here, in Firestore, we have two modes. Either the production mode, where by default, no user is allowed to read or write to any part of the database. Or we can start with test mode, where anyone on the internet can access my database for for a maximum of 30 days, just for the sake of testing. Now, in this Code Lab, I'm just gonna start with test mode, but if you started designing your own app, you will need to be careful with Firestore rules from the very beginning. Like, don't just say, I will do after I finish development. It's a good practice to actually write your rules while you are doing your queries and development. Now it asks me to pick a location. That's the physical location of my data in Google Cloud servers. Where is the majority of your users gonna be? Just pick the closest region to you or to the majority of your users. Now, for me, this is just a Code Lab. The closest location would probably be Europe West. So I'm gonna just enable it. Now, seconds while it's creating my cloud Firestore on Google Cloud. All right, now we have a database, NoSQL database ready to be used. These now that we have them both enabled, we can go back to our code lab. We already have done all these steps. We can click on next. Okay, so now we're going to, now we have a Firebase project ready and we have a Flutter project ready. We need to connect them together to tell our Flutter app on iOS and Android and web and Mac OS how to find this Firebase project that we have just created. So to do that, we first need to use the Firebase SDKs or the packages in Flutter. We're going, since we're gonna use authentication and Firestore, there is a package for Firebase Auth and there is a package for Cloud Firestore. But before we use any product in Firebase from Firebase in Flutter, we first need a very important package that is Firebase Core. How to add it? From the root of our project, we just say flutter pub add Firebase Core, and this will add this package to pubspec.yaml with the latest version available. If you go to pubspec.yaml, we can see that Firebase Core is added. Now, every other Firebase package in Flutter will take the configuration defined by Firebase Core. If you want to use any product from Firebase in Flutter, the very first package you need is Firebase Core. Firebase Core is just gonna define my application, my project with all the configuration, and we're gonna see in a minute. But before we continue, let's import the other packages. That is, again, Flutter pub add. We need Firebase Auth. And then we need Cloud Firestore. And finally, we will add provider. That's what we're going to use for the state management in this app. All right, so now we have all packages set and ready to be used. Let's go back to now. In this, we will need the Firebase CLI to be installed. Before I tell you how we, now if you have any past experience with Flutter and Firebase, you might know that this is the Flutter Fire div. I'm going to just post the link in the chat so you have access to it. So this is the documentation of Flutter and Firebase, all the packages. Now, if we go to the Get Started part, we will notice that we have CLI and manual installation. Now, before CLI became available in December last year. Before the CLI, we used to configure Firebase and Flutter manually. That means there is a different platform setup for each of the 4 supported platforms. We need to do some steps for Android, we need to do some steps for iOS, specifically inside these folders, like inside iOS, inside Android. We needed to do some stuff, and that's what we call manual installation. Luckily, we have the CLI. The CLI helps us do the whole configuration with few commands without even touching the Firebase console. So, but to use the CLI, it's built over the Firebase CLI. So we need to have the Firebase CLI installed. If you already have Node.js and npm on your machine, you can just run npm install Firebase tools, and this will enable Firebase. Next, you need to have Dart, like to run Dart pub global activate Flutterfile CLI. Flutterfile CLI is a command line application, and it's a Dart package. So we can run it from anywhere in, on our machine using Dart pub global, but you need to run it, like to configure your Firebase Flutterfire project, you need to run it from the root of a Flutter project. Okay, a little bit just of notes that's confusing since we announced the support for the CLI and the Dart only initialization. sometimes there are like packages such as analytics, crashlytics, and performance monitoring, where part of the package doesn't work with when you configure your application using the Flutter CLI. So it's just in these 3 plugins, but all other plugins are fully supported. Okay, so I'm going to stop here a little bit and ask if any of you are following up with me on your, like you have cloned, you have installed the stuff, or you want me to continue. Like if you want me to wait a little bit and answer some questions, or you want me to continue. Let me know in the chat.
Please post if you have been following up, and if you have any questions for Mais.
All right, since there are no answers, let's okay, so we were in the CLI. Now I have already installed everything. So if I write Firebase, I can notice there's a bunch of commands that I can run with Firebase, including Firebase Login. So once you install Firebase CLI, you need to log in with the account that has the project you have just created. So I'm already logged into the same account. If I say Firebase projects list, I'm going to fetch the list of projects I have in the account I logged in with, and that is Flutter and Firebase Code Lab, the project I have just created. So cool, we have everything ready. We can now activate the Flutter file CLI by running this command. Right, I already have it active. And if we go back to our project from the terminal, we say Flutter Fire configure. And then you will notice immediately, I'm just going to make this bigger, that says select a Firebase project to configure. It's fetched the same project in here. So it's going to really, you need to log in with the same account that you've created the project. I have it. I'm going to press enter, and then it's going to ask me which platform should your configuration support. You want me to set up Android? You want me to set up iOS? We can just use arrow keys and space to select or unselect any platform. For us now, we want to support all platforms, so click enter. And you can notice that it's already started creating stuff for me and registering it on the Firebase console. Give it a minute just to set up things. Now it says it finished setting up Android and iOS, and now it's setting up Mac OS and then web. Cool. Now it says you have all these apps, and these are the app IDs. If we go back to the console, and I'm going to review. Just click refresh. You can see my apps created already from the console. That's pretty helpful and pretty handy. And to be honest, it used to take like an hour in a code lab like this just to set up and configure stuff for each platform. But now, luckily, we have the CLI, and it made our life easier. Okay, so now we have our app, our Flutter app connected with Firebase. If we go, we actually can notice this Firebase Options.dart. I can just go this. It's a generated file by the CLI. You don't edit anything in this file, but just go over it. So it gets your current platform configuration by switching, and this is the web, this is Android, this is iOS, Mac OS. It fetched everything and did the whole setup for me. But now we need to call, to do the actual configuration. Now that we have Firebase options ready, I'll go back to the code lab, and there is like a little bit of extra steps for Mac OS just to enable the networking for this app. I'm just gonna add them in runner debug profile entitlements. So we go to Mac OS, runner, debug profile entitlements, and in here we'll paste this. Then we go to the release entitlements, and we also paste this. Okay, now we should be ready to go. Close these files. Okay, close macOS as well. Let's go to the next step. So now we're going to use to add the user sign in, the RSVP. How we're going to do that? If you go down a little bit, we'll import the packages that we've just added. That is Firebase Auth, Firebase Core, Provider, and the Firebase Options. And we're going to go down a little bit. We will create a new class that extends change notifier. So that's what we're going to use to update the state of the application. Now, this application state will start initializing Firebase. So let's code, and I'm going to explain it in Visual Studio Code. In here, in main, we go down a little bit, all the way down. Of course, you notice we are actually just pasting everything in main.dart. In an actual application, you're not going to do that, but we're doing it here just for the sake of, it's just a code lab and we want things to stay easy. We are missing the imports, so let's add the imports, Firebase Auth and Firebase Core first. Here. And then we need provider. Then we need to use the authentication widget and the Firebase options. All right, so it already says that it's not used, but we're going to use it shortly. Save that. This is a lintro. We need to have them. All right, so we have all our imports ready, auth and core. Let's now initialize our Firebase project. So let's go down a little bit. The application state will start by calling init method. Now, what goes inside the init method? It's just an async function. Why is it async? Because it's calling the initialize app that is very necessary and mandatory to call this function before you can use any other Firebase package in Flutter. And the initialize app takes an options. Where does this option live? In this generated folder that we have from the CLI. Default Firebase options. Here they are. .current platform. It will just automatically detect which platform I'm on right now, and it will give me the correct options for that platform. So once I call initialize app, now you might wonder, now initialize app is an async function that we call in like on the main method. Isn't that gonna make my app slower maybe? Actually, no, that's right, it's an async function, but it's really fast. It's not doing anything with the network, like it doesn't need any internet connection. It's just doing it locally. But due to the platform connection and native connection in Flutter between Flutter and the platform itself, that's an async call. But it's blazing fast. It's never gonna make your app any slower. And then we noticed that we called Firebase Auth.instance. Now calling Firebase Auth.instance gives us access to all the APIs and methods in Firebase. And then we call user changes. What is user changes? It's a stream. It's a method that returns a stream of type user. That means whenever the user state changes, like they log in, they log out, I will be notified of that in real time in this listener. So that's a stream that I can listen to, and it will update whenever the user logs in or logs out. We will listener, and we will get a user where something happens. Now, if the user logs out, I will get a null. So the user becomes null. If the user logs in, I will have a user, an actual object. So how can I tell if the user logged in or logged out? I'll just do a null check. If the user does not equal null, then set the login state to logged in. If the user does not equal null, then set the state to logged out. That's, of course, if the user equals null. After you do that, please notify all the listeners of the application state. And that's where change notifier comes into action. Any widget that listens to the application state will be notified of the user changes, of the application login state changes. Now, login state is just, the enum that we've just seen inside here in authentication. And that's it, the login state. It starts with logged out. And then we have a getter for that. And then we have the email, just store it so we can use it. Then we have a function where we can start the actual login flow. And clicking on that is going to set the login state to be email address. So when the user wants to log in, they are going to click on a button that says login. And in there, I'm going to ask them for the email address. And of course, setting the login state notified so I can update the UI. And we will see how in a minute. Then we have another function, and this is the verify email function. Remember, you said we don't ask the user to sign in or to sign up. We actually immediately ask them for the email, and then internally we decide if they have an account or not. That's good for user experience. So we will call this function verify email, and in there, if you go there, we will notice that we're calling a function called fetch sign-in methods for this particular email from the Firebase auth. Now, this function, what does it do? It's going to fetch all the sign-in methods linked with that email. In Firebase, you can link multiple providers to the same email. So, for example, I can sign in with email and password, and then I can link my Gmail account to that same email. So this function is going to return a list that has email and Google as providers. For now, since we are only using email and password, these methods or this list of sign-in methods should be, or if we have a user in the system already, I will assume that I will get a list that has password. Now, password is the provider ID of email and sign-in method. It's a provider ID. So each provider in Firebase has an ID. Google has google.com as the ID. Email link, like there, you can send your users an email, a link on their email, and they can use it to sign in. That provider has the provider ID of email link. So each provider has a different ID. For the email and password, it's just password. So if we have like this method returned something, that means we have a user already registered. So please, the application state is now going to be a password. Just we ask them just to enter their password, then we're going to log them in. But if we don't get anything, like methods is empty, we will have to let them register from the beginning. Okay, now the email is going to be set to whatever email I provide here, like this email, we're going to keep it in the state. And then we will notify our listeners since we changed the login. All right, so if any error happened or Firebase authentication throws any kind of errors, we can call the error callback in here. All right. So now the user entered their email and password. How do we sign users in using Firebase Auth in Flutter? Simply by calling this line of code. That's it. One line of code. We can sign in with email and password, give it the email and give it the password. But if you want to register a new user, you're going to user with email and password instead of sign in, and display name you call after the user signs in, you're gonna get a user credentials, and these credentials as the user, your user object, and your users have a profile. In that profile, they have a display name, an image, wherever they have, you can update that. Since we asked the user already to enter their display name when they register, so we can update their profile with the display name passed to this function. Now, I'm explaining functions. We didn't put them yet into practice, but all these functions are just the business logic. We don't have any UIs here. Finally, we have the function sign out. We call it when we want the user to sign out. All right. How we are going to use this application state? If we go up a little bit to main, we're going to wrap our application with this application state. Since we say this is an application state and whatever happens, I want it to be available to all my applications and the underlying widgets using provider, I'm going to wrap my application with a change notifier provider. And this change notifier provider is going to create a new application state and is going to return my app as its child. Cool. Now, if we just hot reload, nothing happened. Nothing yet happened but I now have my application state ready to be used. Let's go back to the code lab and see what is the next step. So we already have done this step. Now, actually use and add the authentication widget. Let's copy this part of the code. Code a little bit. And we're going to paste it. We're going to paste it here under the divider. Okay, now you notice that I added Firebase Core, Cloudflare, like I added all the packages without actually restarting my application. I need to shut down the whole application and click on Start Debugging again so it gets these packages. Let's now, let me explain what's going on here. Now, if we go back here, we know that we have made our application state available to the whole widget tree that comes after app. Okay, so how I'm going to be able to listen to this application state or consume whatever state is inside of it, I'm going to use the consumer, and consumer is a widget provided by provider package. Consumer takes a type that is the type I want to listen to. In our case, it's the application state, and it returns a builder. This builder is going to be called whenever the state is changes. That is, whenever notify listeners is called. So we'll go back a little bit. We will see that we're returning our authentication widget, which will remember this switch statement that we have for the different login states. That's where we will pass our login state, and whenever it changes, it will authentication widget. No, I'm passing everything from the app state. Let's wait just a little bit so it builds. Let me check if there's any questions in here. Okay, thanks, Doug. I hope I spelled your name correctly. Okay, so while it builds, let's see what's in the next step. Once we have, we will see this RSVP button. And we're going to test it out shortly. If we go to the next step, what is the next step? Is Firestore. Exciting. So we've finished the whole setup. We can log any users and sign them up and, you know, detect all kind of errors and validations, everything in just a few lines of code. That's how, especially Firebase authentication, I think it's a very amazing product in Firebase. Makes authentication much, much more easier.
Yeah, I tried Firebase with Angular.
Cloud Firestore is a little bit of a huge package. That's why it takes time to build.
I have used Firebase with Angular, so yeah, I just tried to explore on Firebase. So, but I ended up make sure that if you're, you know, if you're trying to learn something from this, or if you once you're done, please delete your project, or else if you accidentally publish your project and forget to delete it, you're going to be paying. I ended up paying Firebase, I think about 60 or $80 because I forgot to delete the project after I tried.
My headphones are playing weird. Oh, build time and sharing screen. Right, let's go.
Yeah, I was about to say that we can move forward so that while it's building.
All right, so now that we are in the Cloud Firestore step, we actually have 3 steps now left in the code lab, and all of them are going to be about Firestore. So we will first, in step number 6, we're going to write messages to Cloud Firestore. In step number 7, we're going to read messages from Firestore, and then we're going to set up the security rules. First of all, the data model, or how data is represented in Firestore. Firestore is a NoSQL database. So like, you know, MongoDB and all these NoSQL databases, it has a flexible data model. In our case now, in our application, we just want to have a little box where people can send messages in a public discussion for all the guests who RSVP'd to our event. So how the data model of that case is going to look like, we will have a collection that's called guest book. And inside the collection, we will have multiple documents. Each document will represent one message in our discussion. So generally the data model of Firestore, it starts always with a top level collections. So you can have as many collections as you want. And then in the next level, you're going to have documents. So inside one collection, you will have multiple documents. And then inside each document, you can have sub-collections or you can have properties. In our case, message one is a document and it has multiple properties: name, text, timestamp, and a user ID. Name is going to be of type string, text is string, timestamp is a date type, and user ID is a string type. Each message should have these 4 properties. Now, since this is a NoSQL, oh my God, it's still building. Anyway, since this is NoSQL, it means we can have one document that doesn't have a name, and still Firestore is not going to complain. It's not a SQL database. We're going to see how we're going to use security rules to actually validate that each single document we're going to write to our Firebase collection will contain these 4 properties. Okay, go down a little bit. We will add these 2 imports, Cloud Firestore and the Dart async library, and we will see how we're going to use them. Let's add them. Top. Save. Okay. Now down a little bit, we're gonna add a new widget to our main. That widget is a stateful widget. It's called guest book, and it will contain the whole discussion box and all the messages sent by all the guests in this event. So let's copy that. Go down a little, like to the end of the file. Or probably we want to paste that above the application state. Now we have, let's go over it a little bit. Oh my God, I mean, I'm gonna give up on the iOS simulator and I will. So let's try how the app will look like on Chrome. I haven't changed anything, it should run correctly. Back to guestbook, it's a stateful widget. That means it can modify its inner state without like using, set state. And guestbook is going to take an add message callback. This callback is going to be called whenever I click on send. Like when I want to send a new message, I will click on that, and this is the callback that's going to be called. If you go down a little bit, we'll notice we have a form key, and that form key is for this text form field. The text form field is just a field where we can write a message and then hit send. Now, the validator says we cannot have a null value or have an empty value inside, so we cannot send empty messages. It has to have something. This is the validator. And we have a hint text that says, then we have a sized box, then we have a styled button, and that button says send, and it will take our add message callback. Now, the add message callback is going to call Firestore and will post our message to Firestore, and we will see how we're going to implement that. And then it will clear my controller. What is the controller? If you go up a little bit, controller here is tied up to the text form field. The controller contains the text that is currently being written inside the text field. So once I call controller dot clear after I send the message, it's gonna clear the controller. Whatever message I wrote in that text field, it's gonna be wiped out. The guest book. Let's go back to the code lab, and I'm really sorry, I don't know why it's not building. taking forever to build, but probably because I'm sharing the screen, you know, MacBook. Oh, we have it finally. MacBook takes forever to build if I'm sharing screen. So this is our app. Okay. Now we are in the step where we are going to add the guest book to our app, like the main page. So if we go back, here we go. Finally, we can see the RSVP button. Finally, if we click on it, now remember what are the states of our app. Now we are in the state email. So I'm going to enter test@test.com. I'm gonna click. It will detect that I don't have an account yet. So it will ask me for my name, my one, and a password. And then I'll click save. Now I'm logged in. I see a log out button. Okay, if I log out, I'll see RSVP again. If I RSVP and use the same email I have used before, that means I already have an account. Click next. It's not gonna ask me for my display name. I already have asked me for the password. So I will sign in. And here I am. If I go to the Firebase console, just to show you how my user looks like in the console, I can see I have a user with this identifier, and it has the provider email. It's created today, last signed in today, and it has a random. Each user signs in using our app will have its own unique UID. We can tie this UID up to our Firestore database. So we know which user wrote which message. All right. So let's now add the step where we actually use the guest book. We will add the here. Let me just add a little bit of a sized box height. Then we will add guest book, and it should take, which I will leave empty. Back to callback. Now our callback will actually return a message. Let me go down a little bit and show you. Add message. We are passing the controller.text. The text that the user have entered, we're gonna pass it up using this callback. If you go down, up, we're gonna just print this message to make sure that everything is working as we want. We haven't done anything with Firestore until now. We see a text form field, and we see a button. If we say hi, and I click send, I can see that it's printed right here. To join, send, I will see it here. So perfect, everything is working perfectly, and we are receiving the message. Now it's time to actually implement the add message function. So let's go on. This is the message. We will add it in the application state. So let's copy it and go down to our application state. Down, down, down. After sign out, I will add my new message. My new method, add message to guest book. And this method has a feature of type document reference, and it will take a message. Now, every document in Firestore in Flutter is represented by the document reference type. Now, if I am logged out. User messages? No, I don't want them to send messages if they don't have accounts. So I will make a little check here. I will ask if login state does not equal logged in, then throw exception, you must be signed in. Other than that, return a document snapshot. That is the result of adding my new message to Firestore. Let's go through that step by step. First of all, I'm calling Firebase Firestore from the Cloud Firestore package. Then I'm saying .instance just to access all the APIs, similar to Firebase Auth, if we remember in here. And most of the Firebase packages actually have a very API. Then I want to write a query. So we said that the data model in Firestore starts always with a collection. You cannot start with a document. So first I'm going to call .collection, and I'm going to name it guestbook. And inside that collection, I will add a new document. I don't have a document ready. I will add a new one. And that document will have these keys and these values. So we will have the text, that is the message itself, and the timestamp, that is we call date time .now, and we convert it to a timestamp. And then the name of the user who sent the message, Firebase auth.instance.currentuser.displayname. Notice how we accessed the profile information using Firebase authentication. And then we will also add the user ID, the unique identifier of that user, to their document. Cool. Now let's call this in our guestbook callback. In here, instead of print, I will call. So I want to add or have the application state in the guestbook. To do that, I will do something similar. So I will wrap my guestbook inside a consumer. Return the guestbook. Cool. Now I have access to my app state. Just let's make that a little bit more readable. And then in here, we can say app state dot add message to guestbook. And you notice I removed like that lambda function. The reason is that both add message and add message to guestbook have a similar signature. So if they both like add message is going to return a string, and I will return a string. I hope I'm actually correct. Okay, let's test it. Send. Of course, nothing happened in the UI yet because we didn't list or read the message from Firestore. But if we go here and refresh, I should see my message in Firestore. Oh, here we have a random document with a random ID have been generated or added that has my name, and it has the message I've sent, the timestamp, and my user ID. See, this user ID is the same as the user ID in here. It starts with RJ, and in here I can see RJ. Cool. So let's just see how cool it is to actually send. Hey. See how quickly it added the new document. So how can I now read these messages in here so my users can have a discussion in real time? Let's go back to our guestbook or to the code lab and see what is the next step. Wiring the UI into the database. Oh, we have done this step. And then we are sending messages. Let's go to the step number 7. Synchronize messages. So first of all, we will add a new property here, or I mean, a new type that is a data model type called guest book message. Let's copy that and explain it here. Paste it up. So guest book is just a class that takes a name and a message. And I'm going to use that to display a list of messages. And then we will add these three guys. Let's see what do they do. Go back to the application state. Here, or maybe here. The first one is a stream subscription. Why a stream subscription? We're going to subscribe to the stream that I receive from Firestore in order to get the real-time update my UI, and we'll see how we're going to use it. Now, the stream subscription will return a query snapshot, and that is the snapshot of the query I have sent to Firestore. So I'm asking Firestore to return all the messages inside the guest book collection. That is a query snapshot. Then we have a list of guest book message, just a normal list, and a getter for list. This is a private. Or how we do, or where we actually listen to these messages. Inside init, we will in here go in it. Yep, in here. So first, I want the user, whenever the user logs in, I want to start listening to Firestore. So the user is not null. I'm going to paste my code here, and let's examine what's going on here. You remember our stream subscription. We're going to assign it to firestore.instance.collection, and then I'm going to, do the whole query thing, and then listen. And just hover over listen to see what type it is. It has the type stream subscription of query snapshot, and that's exactly the type of our stream or of our property. So I will just assign it to this. And the reason I'm doing that is because when the user logs out, I want to do this. Is stream subscription dot cancel. So I want to cancel the stream subscription once the user signs out, just to save resources. Cool. Let's save now and refresh. Now I should be able to see messages, but I'm not seeing any messages. Let's go on and see what did we do wrong. Of course, I didn't explain what's going on inside the listener. So listen will return the whole whenever anything in Firestore changes. So for example, I added a new document. I'm gonna get a snapshot in here. I modified an existing document. I'm gonna get a snapshot here. And this snapshot represents all the documents that satisfies this query. It doesn't really return just the document that changed. And the reason for that is just to keep complicated, So I can, whenever I receive a new snapshot, I just can, the guest book messages, assign it to an empty list, clean it up with whatever messages it had in the past. And then I'm gonna write a for loop over all the documents inside my snapshot. And for each document, notice the type. For each document, I will add a new item that is of type guest book message to the guest book messages list. It takes the name from the document. I can access all the data in one document by calling .data and then give it the key and the type. Of course, if I don't have a name and I called .data with the key name, it will throw an exception saying that there is no name. It's actually null. In such cases, when using a NoSQL database and in Firestore, you might want to add some guards to your data models. For this data model, I can say, if we go back here, if you don't find like 2 question marks, if this is null, you don't find a name in this collection, maybe I can assign it an empty string, right? string. Okay. For example, you can just guard against any empty name or null name, like the name doesn't exist. But in our case, I don't need that because I'm going to validate using security rules that each added document to Firestore is going to have a name and a message. All right, so let's save that. And in here, when the user signs out, I want to clean my list, assigning it to an empty list. Okay. Go down and see how we're going to actually read this. So to read this, we're going to get back to our guest book widget, and we will add a new property that is the list of messages I want to display. Go back to the guest book. In here, we'll add a new property, and then I'll say this is a required property, this.messages. Go back up. See, it's already complaining that where is the messages? So we're just gonna pass it from messages, app state that we already have access to it, and I will pass the guest book messages. You notice that I actually have access to the private variables. It's because I'm doing everything inside main.dart. If I to move things inside another folder, I will not have access to them. So let's now do a hot restart just to make sure everything is working correctly. Hi. Again. Send. Nothing happened. Let's make sure that I'm passing the messages, but I'm not displaying anything in the screen. So let's see what in here. Yeah, we will wrap our, this widget in a column, and in that column we will add a for loop. Let's do it. So our guest book in here, we'll wrap the form. Right, where did they wrap it? Yeah, starting with a padding. Okay, so the whole thing in a column. This is a helper in VS Code and actually also in Android Studio Code. Then we have a list, and down here we will paste inside any list. In Flutter, you can do a for loop, so we can loop over every message in our widget, and for each we will return a paragraph that has the message name and then the message itself. Save. Now I should be able messages. Now you can see it all the messages that are already 3 discussions and 3 messages. All right, we'll do just a small modification here. Cross-axis alignment should be start. We have things ready. I will just to have fun with this, we'll go and maybe run the Mac OS version and sign in with another account and have a conversation with myself from 2 different accounts. Let's see how does this time is that. Of course, I think we're gonna wait forever. So while we wait for that, let's continue. Next, and to the last step. The last step is to put or define the security rules for our messages. So the guest book. Let's do that. From the Firestore console, if we go to rules, we can notice already we have some rules in here, and we have it open, read and write until 28/3 this year, like after 30 days. So let's modify that. How does the security rules works? Now, the first matcher here we have is matching all the documents. Okay. Now we want to go inside and match the guest book collection, and actually any document, guest book, or message ID. Open that. I hope I did write it correctly. It's always hard to predict how to write it. Oh yes, I did. Okay. No, I didn't. Whatever. I'm just gonna copy it. I'm missing a semicolon. Right. And then we will add the security rules. So for the security rules, we will allow the read if the user is authenticated. So if you have an account, you can view all messages of all the users. Just read them. But you cannot write a new message until the ID of your message matches your user authenticated ID. So let's see how we can do that. I'll try to write them from scratch. Allow read if request, so the incoming request dot auth dot UID does not equal no. Cool. Now we will set the rules for write. So allow write request dot auth dot UID and I actually, from the security rules, I have access to the content of that like of the request that is coming. So whatever data I sent, I have access to the field inside these data. So we say request dot data. I hope I'm doing that correctly. Dot resource dot data. Cool. Dot resource dot data dot user ID. Now user ID matches the property name in our Firestore. Cool. Click on publish. Just cool. And go back. That way, we have guarded our Firestore database with some security rules. Now, I've talked about the validation rules, how we can do that. Now, we can add additional rules to the right part. So let's do that. If the request, like if the user is authenticated and let's add another one. Oh, it's compiled finally. Request resource data name does not equal null. Make sure I'm doing that correctly. Oh, we can do that either this way or as they did it in the code lab. I always forget the syntax in here. So if name, like the key name, exists in requested resource to data. So the requested resource to data is like a JSON representation that has keys and values. So I'm just saying if it exists inside data. Cool. Let's hot restart both of them. Why are you complaining? Okay, so now we have a Mac OS application and a web application running, both running our application. I think there's something in here. Method. Well, that's weird. Something is not supported. Let's try running the Android app. Run. And by the way, we actually have finished the code lab successfully. I just wanted to show you how cool it is to have the updates on real database. Let's see what's left. Next, there is, I'm not gonna go through this bonus step. I want you, as an exercise, to go through this code lab after our workshop and go through the 8 steps that I've just explained. Do it yourself and then do this extra step by yourself. It's a very good practice and teaches you more stuff and tricks about using Firestore and Firebase in Flutter. And then congratulations, you have finished this code lab. It's a very interesting code lab, and it actually sums up many different topics and many different things about, how to manage back-end stuff, how to use Firebase, how to use provider, how to use many things. So I really recommend you that today, tomorrow, just open your IDE and start going through this code lab. You will find some next step and very useful resources. With this, we are done, but I really want to show you how we can have this discussion in real time. Meanwhile,
sorry
yes.
if I'm interrupting, but then we can do the quiz while it's building, so that
yes,
that will be,
of course, yes.
We'll have some time for that. So I do have the quiz here. Please do log in and participate in this so that we can get started. This is, I'm going to start. Activate the quiz. So I don't see any participants yet, but then if you guys want to, Doug is there. Thank you, Doug. Just try it. It's just for fun, okay? It's not that, I know it's a lot of information that Maya's covered, and I personally have to rewatch this whole thing again. But it's very informative. I have tried Firebase with Angular, but I'm very tempted to try it with Flutter.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to wait for a couple of minutes so that we can get started on this. I am going to start the quiz. If you have not joined the quiz, please do join. Okay. Let's get started. Okay, every question here is 45 seconds because it's got a bit more. Okay, it starts now. So which of the following authentication providers is not supported by Firebase? You have 10 more seconds to go.
Maybe you can share your screen.
Hang on. I don't know how to share. Yeah, I tried to share it yesterday, but then all the questions are getting displayed. That's why I did not share.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, okay, let's see. None of the above is the correct answer. So we have Few people who got it right. Now I'm going to go to the next question. So in Flutter, we can configure a Firebase app without using Firebase Console on the web. Say true or false. Okay, so let's see. True is the right answer. 29% of the people have gotten it right. And then moving to the next one, please read the question. It's so, yeah, we are almost there. The right answer is the second option. So about 30% of the people have gotten it right. I know it was a lot of information that you covered, Mias. So like I said, it's personally. Next question, Firestore is a, what is it? Okay. Actually, I was also Mayas. Can you just tell, because I think one person has said it's a single region NoSQL database, because we chose the region when we were trying to do the workshop. Or is it?
Yes. There is. I hope I did not mess up the question, but there's an answer saying multiple region NoSQL database.
It says cloud hosted NoSQL.
Yes,
database.
yeah,
That's
cloud
the right
hosted.
answer. But then I think I was also contemplating between the two.
Yeah, so single region, if you noticed when I was choosing the region, there was multiple regions. So it cannot be a single region. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now moving on to the last one. So yes.
Sorry, I think I made it too confusing.
No, because it's something that let's talk about it after this. Okay. So we have the second option is the right option here. So I'm just going to go and finish this one. Yeah. Doug, you got most out of it. Thanks for doing this. Okay. Mayas, if your thing is still running or building, we can do the raffle quickly. How about that?
Yeah, it's built now. can show them.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
Let's go. So I have a web app, and here's the iPhone application. I say, you notice that there's something like a mistake, and you know, whatever. Let's RSVP test@test.com. That's my like the account I have already, and then I'm gonna RSVP with another account. Test2@test.com. Say, Deepa, let's have you having a conversation with me. Right. Hey. You can see I already can see the message here. I send it here. I can see the message here. Yeah, that's what I wanted to show.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you.
It is.
Thank you. Yeah, I am going to share my screen if I could. So let's do the raffle part. Okay. I hope I've added everybody's name in here.